The more perfect something appears, the more fragile it becomes. Camille had always believed that. And now, standing at the edge of the life she thought she knew, she was watching perfection crack like glass under pressure. A tech mogul's pregnant wife serves him divorce papers after discovering his affair. They seem to have it all: wealth, prestige, and a dream lifestyle nestled in a luxurious estate on the outskirts of San Francisco. By day, Nathaniel Cole was the picture-perfect entrepreneur, shaking hands with venture capitalists and sipping single-origin espresso in sleek offices overlooking the bay. By night, he played the role of devoted husband to Camille, a sharp-minded philanthropist expecting their first child. But behind the curtain of perfection, cracks were forming. Unknown to Camille, Nathaniel was hiding a secret that would shatter the world she had built with him. And once uncovered, it would trigger a devastating chain of events, ending with divorce papers in her hand. Camille Cole stood on the balcony of their lavish San Francisco penthouse, her gaze locked on the twinkling cityscape. Her hands cradled her growing belly, the life inside her a symbol of the future she had imagined with Nathaniel. Raised in a humble home in Oregon, where college savings were more dream than reality, and the county fair was the annual highlight, meeting Nathaniel had felt like stepping into an unimaginable new world. Nathaniel Cole came from generational wealth. His grandfather had founded Cole Innovations, a powerhouse tech company responsible for several of Silicon Valley's early breakthroughs. Determined to carry on the legacy, Nathaniel launched his own data analytics firm straight out of Stanford, transforming it into a multi-million-dollar empire in just a few years. He was the type of man who could command a room just by walking into it, tall, charismatic, with piercing slate-blue eyes that conveyed confidence. Nathaniel was admired by many, envied by more, and truly understood by very few. In the early days of their romance, Camille was drawn to Nathaniel's magnetic presence, though a small part of her remained cautious. She had grown up watching her mother survive the abandonment of her father, and she knew that money and influence were no promises of loyalty. Still, Nathaniel's drive, extravagant gestures, and the calm security he radiated swept her off her feet. When he proposed over candlelight at the top of the mark, she truly believed fate had handed her a fairy tale. Yet now, standing on the balcony, she couldn't ignore the subtle shift in Nathaniel's demeanor. There was a growing, unexplainable distance between them. He had once raced home from meetings to tell her about his day, insisted on sharing late dinners, even if it was nearly midnight. But now the phone calls dragged late into the night. Business trips sprung up out of nowhere, and when he was home, he seemed weighed down by secrets he wouldn't share. Even if it was at midnight, they used to share meals together. Now phone calls stretched into the early hours, business trips popped up without warning, and when he was home, Nathaniel seemed weighed down by invisible burdens he wouldn't speak of. The signs were undeniable. His phone buzzed constantly, even during dinner, and his once affectionate eyes now seemed distant, always scanning, calculating. His calls, always taken behind the closed door of his office, would cut off the moment Camille entered. Unfamiliar credit card charges appeared, exclusive lounges and clubs she'd never even heard of. She had overheard him murmur the name Sienna more times than she cared to count. Each time, he brushed it off casually, insisting she was imagining things. But Camille wasn't imagining the way his voice softened when he said the name, or the faint smile that sometimes played on his lips afterward. Camille might not have grown up in luxury, but she wasn't naive. She had read enough stories of powerful men succumbing to temptation. And worse, she had seen it with her own mother, who had once sat at the same kitchen table, hiding heartbreak behind coffee cups and polite smiles. One evening, as she flipped through prenatal care pamphlets from her last OB visit, Camille's phone buzzed. It was Sarah Donnelly, a real estate agent and longtime friend who had occasionally worked with Nathaniel's firm. She had also always been one to speak the truth, no matter how difficult. "I really don't want to alarm you," Sarah began, her voice hesitant, laced with concern. "But I've seen Nathaniel around the city with a woman, and she definitely didn't look like a colleague." Camille's stomach turned to stone. Her heart raced, fingers tightening around her phone until her knuckles whitened. The room spun slightly, her vision blurred by tears she refused to let fall. A wave of nausea rose, grief, disbelief, and dread colliding at once. She forced herself to stay calm. Are you sure it was him? Could it have been a business associate? There was a pause. Camille, it was at the Marlowe Hotel. And the way they acted? That wasn't business. That moment marked a shift. Camille realized she was standing on the precipice of betrayal, no longer grounded in the security she once felt. Her hands instinctively moved to cradle her belly, as if shielding her child from the truth she had just absorbed. She thanked Sarah for telling her and promised they'd speak again. But as she hung up, a hollow ache crept into her chest. She needed proof. Tangible, undeniable evidence. Something more than the intuition of a pregnant woman desperate for clarity. Camille turned to a trusted friend of the family, Jonah Rise, a former detective, now working as a discreet private investigator. He had helped her father years ago in a property theft case and had earned Camille's unwavering trust. She handed him everything she had: records of late-night calls, suspicious hotel receipts, and the trail of secrecy Nathaniel had left behind. Camille laid out every detail for Jonah, from the cryptic phone calls to the questionable hotel receipts she'd uncovered. Jonah listened closely, jotting notes on a small legal pad. "I'll see what I can find," he said with measured calm. His voice was steady, but his eyes flickered with concern. "Just be prepared, Camille. Sometimes the truth isn't what we want to hear." 3 days later, Jonah returned quietly and handed her a thick manila folder. Inside were photographs. Nathaniel, stepping out of an upscale fusion restaurant in Soma, arm around a woman with auburn hair flowing in soft waves over her shoulders. They laughed as they spoke, body language intimate and unmistakable. The next photos showed them entering a boutique hotel suite together in the heart of downtown. The shock of it made Camille's breath catch. She felt as though the floor had shifted beneath her. The woman was identified as Sienna Blake, a recently hired consultant at Nathaniel's firm. Even in still images, the chemistry between them suggested something far beyond professional. Camille's stomach churned. The nausea twisted deeper as the realization set in. Her worst fear was reality. Nathaniel was having an affair. A sharp pain bloomed in her chest, as if betrayal had found a physical place to land. She remembered the moment she told him she was pregnant, the joy on his face, how he said it was the beginning of their forever. Those memories now felt stained, poisoned by his betrayal. But Camille refused to be paralyzed by heartache. She wiped away tears with the back of her hand, jaw tightening. She made the decision to take control. Her first call was to the most formidable divorce attorney in the city, Richard Monroe. Known for his sharp strategies and unwavering loyalty to his clients, he came highly recommended. Camille was clear. She didn't want drama, but she needed protection. She had spent years building a philanthropic foundation under the Cole name, and she wouldn't allow Nathaniel to take that from her. That same evening, she confronted him. She kept it casual, testing the waters. Mentioned she'd bumped into Sarah, and that there were whispers about him being seen around town with someone new. His reaction was exactly what she expected. Annoyance, deflection. "It's just business, Camille. You know how this city loves to gossip." His dismissive tone stung more than she anticipated. The lie was so smooth, so familiar, it made her skin crawl. She looked straight into his eyes, searching for even a glimmer of guilt or fear. But all she saw was practiced indifference. For now, she didn't let on what she knew, but her heart ached. She might still love him, but Nathaniel had chosen a path that fractured their vows and put everything they'd built at risk. In her darkest moments, she bit back tears and reminded herself of one thing. The child growing inside her was her first and only priority. The baby deserved a mother who was strong, emotionally stable, and capable of creating a nurturing space, even if that space no longer included Nathaniel. Sienna Blake was far from a random fling. Through Jonah Ray's investigation, Camille learned that Sienna boasted an impressive academic background, with dual degrees in finance and marketing. She was said to have captivated several high-profile clients at the firm, dazzling them with her wit and ability to close high-stakes deals. It was clear she knew how to turn charm into currency. But what unsettled Camille most was Sienna's history. One entanglement after another with influential, wealthy men. She had a habit of embedding herself into their lives, often right as she climbed another rung in her career ladder. Camille began to see a disturbing pattern. Sienna's success wasn't just tied to her skills, but to her strategy of seduction. Camille's heartbreak deepened as she began hearing from mutual acquaintances at charitable events, people whispering that Sienna was being introduced as a close friend of Nathaniel. The murmurs grew louder. This wasn't a fleeting affair. Sienna was staking a claim, making herself visible. Nathaniel even went so far as to appoint her to the board of the Cole Foundation. A decision that infuriated Camille, especially since it happened behind closed doors. It felt like more than betrayal. It felt like erasure. Determined to maintain her composure, Camille didn't withdraw from public life. She threw herself into her philanthropic efforts, focusing on providing scholarships and educational resources to underserved communities. Each new donor she secured, each child helped, was a salve to her wounded spirit. Every handshake was a defiance. Every dollar raised, a reminder that she was still standing. Yet she couldn't ignore the sideways glances from members of San Francisco's social elite, the pitying expressions, the whispers behind raised champagne flutes. News of Nathaniel's affair was leaking fast, threatening to taint everything she had worked for. It was as though she were walking through a minefield of carefully masked judgment. One late afternoon, Camille and Nathaniel ended up in the same room longer than usual. Sitting in the lavishly decorated living room of their home, framed by designer sculptures and velvet couches that radiated wealth. Camille broached the subject again. "I heard from one of our board members that Sienna Blake is now actively involved in the foundation," she said, her voice even. "Why wasn't I consulted about this?" Nathaniel shrugged, attempting to look unconcerned. "We needed some fresh energy," he replied. "You've had a lot on your plate with the pregnancy, and Sienna's been great at handling some of the high-dollar donors. I didn't think you'd want the added stress." Camille's tone sharpened. "Stress? Nathaniel, I built that foundation from the ground up. Doesn't the founder deserve at least a heads up before someone new is brought into a senior role?" He crossed his arms. "We're both working toward the same mission here, Camille. And with the baby coming, I just want what's best for the family and the foundation." The hypocrisy in his voice burned like acid. Camille drew in a long breath, fighting the urge to lash out. "Just remember, I have a voice in these decisions too," she said, her tone deliberately calm, though her insides burned. Nathaniel didn't reply. He looked away, jaw tightening, then turned and walked out of the room. She could feel it, the silent war taking shape between them, a cold war of tension and betrayal where words were weapons, and silence was just as lethal. Camille was no stranger to hardship, but this was different. The father of her unborn child was lying to her face, integrating his mistress into their shared professional life, and expecting her to keep quiet. That night, while Nathaniel was out, presumably with Sienna, Camille sat alone, scrolling through old photos of their early years together. Pictures of European vacations, charity galas, and the night he first mentioned starting a family. Images that once held joy now felt like faded lies. Tears stung her eyes. She placed a hand over her belly and whispered to her unborn baby, "I'll protect you, no matter what." It wasn't just a promise, it was a vow. Her path was now clear. She would gather every piece of evidence necessary to build an airtight divorce case. With Jonah Rice's help, Camille compiled a damning file cataloging Nathaniel's indiscretions. She had copies of bank records, credit card charges, and a precise timeline of romantic dinners and expensive gifts purchased for Sienna. Each revelation cut deep, but Camille pressed on, determined to shield her child from further betrayal. The pain fueled her. Every new receipt was a reminder that she had every right to walk away. When the chance finally came to confront him, it exploded. It was a bright Thursday morning. Camille had just returned from a prenatal checkup, exhausted and aching for rest. As she passed by Nathaniel's office, a room he usually kept locked, she noticed the door slightly ajar. She nudged it open. What she saw made her blood boil. Sienna was perched on Nathaniel's lap, their faces only inches apart, laughing over a spread of documents. Their intimacy was casual, practiced, as if this wasn't the first time. "Get out," Camille hissed, stepping into the room, her voice trembling with fury. The moment shattered like glass. Sienna scrambled off Nathaniel's lap, smoothing her dress as though trying to reclaim some semblance of professionalism. But the tension in the room was thick and undeniable. Nathaniel rose quickly, his face pale. "Camille, you're home early." Camille's eyes burned holes through him. "And you brought your mistress into our house, into your office. Do you have absolutely no shame, Nathaniel?" Sienna glanced from Nathaniel to Camille, her expression a mix of guilt and nerve. I should probably leave," she murmured, her voice shaky. Camille blocked the doorway. "No, stay," she said coldly. "If you're bold enough to sneak into my husband's office during business hours, don't act shy now." "Why run now? Face the mess you helped create," Camille snapped. Nathaniel reached out, placing a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. "Camille, let's not make a scene," he said, voice low, almost pleading. She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "A scene? That's what concerns you? You've already turned our marriage into a spectacle, Nathaniel." Her eyes narrowed, voice cutting like glass. "You lied to me. You disrespected me. And now you're parading your affair around like it's nothing. Right here, in our home." Tears welled in Camille's eyes, but her tone remained unshaken. "You made your choices. Now, both of you will live with the consequences." She stepped aside, allowing Sienna to slip out of the room. Sienna didn't say a word. She didn't look back. Nathaniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration radiating off him. "You have no idea what it's like, Camille. The pressure I'm under, running the company, the foundation, the board. You've been so focused on the baby, you've shut me out. I've been lonely." Camille stared at him, disgust rising in her chest. "Poor you," she said, dripping with sarcasm. "While I've been building a life, literally, and holding the foundation together, you've been crawling into bed with someone else." He tried to speak again, but she silenced him with a look. "I'm done, Nathaniel. No more excuses, no apologies. I've already spoken to my attorney. I'm filing for divorce." The words struck like a gavel, final and undeniable. Nathaniel stood frozen, as if he never expected her to go that far. Camille turned and walked out, tears finally breaking through her composure. In that moment, she knew. This marriage, once sacred and secure, had collapsed into a web of deception. She wouldn't pretend anymore. She would no longer play the quiet wife who suffered in silence. The next morning, Camille woke in the guest bedroom. The thought of sleeping in the bed she once shared with Nathaniel made her skin crawl. She felt hollow, a ghost of herself. But the soft, fluttering movements of her baby reminded her she wasn't alone. She had to be strong. Without hesitation, she called Richard Monroe. The wheels were already in motion. She wanted Nathaniel served with divorce papers, and soon. Meanwhile, Jonah Rye's investigation took a deeper turn. He uncovered that Sienna wasn't just romantically involved with Nathaniel, she also had her sights set on a high-stakes development deal. It was a massive commercial residential venture in the heart of downtown Oakland, a project that could double Cole Enterprises' revenue if secured. And Sienna, armed with insider knowledge gained through her closeness to Nathaniel, was quietly assembling her own consortium of investors. She was positioning herself as a direct competitor. She wasn't just sleeping with the CEO, she was preparing to overtake him. When Camille learned about this impending corporate ambush, something dark sparked within her. It was no longer about heartbreak. This was war. She had once thought Sienna was merely a passing affair, a self-important opportunist. But this was bigger. Sienna was a threat to the entire Cole legacy, an empire that, one day, was supposed to belong in part to Camille's child. And Nathaniel, blinded by ego and lust, had handed her the keys. Camille knew she had to fight, not just for her pride, but for her child's rightful share of what Nathaniel had put at risk. Later that evening, under a sky rumbling with storm clouds, Camille confronted Nathaniel again, this time with icy precision and undeniable proof. He was seated in the living room, a tumbler of whiskey swirling in his hand, lost in thought. "You need to see what's happening?" Camille said coldly, tossing a file of Jonah's findings onto the coffee table. "Sienna's not just wrecking our marriage, she's positioning herself to hijack the Oakland project." Nathaniel stared at the documents, emails, financial breakdowns, investor correspondence. The truth was there in black and white. His eyes widened, and he looked up at her, stricken. He looked like a man waking up in the middle of a fire he had set himself. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" Camille snapped. "The point is, you're risking everything. Your company, your reputation, your family's name. She's been using you, Nathaniel. using the affair to gain access, make connections, and when it all crumbles, she'll be fine, richer, and laughing at how easily she played you. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer force of fury she had kept locked away. Nathaniel's shoulders sagged. For a moment, something like remorse flickered in his expression. He drew a shaky breath. Camille, I never wanted this. I lost my way. I wasn't thinking clearly. The pressure, it got to me. She felt a flicker of pity, but it burned off quickly in the heat of her fury. You're going to lose more than just your company, she said, voice low and steely. If you keep going down this path, I'm filing for divorce, Nathaniel. And I won't let our child get pulled into your mess. He reached out, grabbing her hand, desperation lacing his voice. Camille, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I'll end things with Sienna. I'll undo the damage to the business. Just don't leave me. She pulled her hand away, her voice barely a whisper. You should have thought of that before you brought her into our lives. I loved you once, Nathaniel. A part of me probably always will. But the scars you've left, they don't heal easily. They stood there, eyes locked across a growing divide, like two people on opposite ends of a broken bridge. Outside, rain pounded against the windows. Lightning lit the room in fleeting, jarring bursts. The moment felt unreal, like watching someone else's life fall apart. But Camille stood firm. No matter the heartbreak, she was resolved to protect her child, secure their future, and walk away from a marriage that no longer existed in spirit. 2 weeks went by. Each day was thick with emotional distance and calculated moves. Nathaniel, sensing the fallout, began phasing Sienna out of the firm's high-stakes operations. Her board membership at the Cole Foundation was quietly revoked, citing creative differences. But the strain between him and Camille was palpable, unmistakable to anyone under their roof. On a crisp Friday morning, as sunlight stretched across the marble floors of the penthouse, a uniformed process server entered Cole Enterprises headquarters. His name tag read, T. Lynch, and he held a manila envelope bearing the insignia of Camille's legal firm. The office staff exchanged quick glances as he made his way to Nathaniel's office. Nathaniel was mid-conference call, his executive team on speakerphone, when Thomas stepped inside. Nathaniel Cole? The man asked. Nathaniel looked up, confused. Yes? With calm precision, Thomas extended the envelope. You've been served. Nathaniel's cheeks flushed. His hand trembled as he ended the call and tore open the envelope. His eyes scanned the divorce filing, Camille's name front and center. It was official. She had done it. The dissolution of their marriage was in motion, citing adultery, emotional distress, and irreconcilable differences. Word spread through the company like wildfire. Employees pretended to focus, but whispers flitted across departments. Some sympathized with Camille, others feared for the future of the firm. Nathaniel slammed his door shut, bracing himself against the thick wood, breath shallow and ragged. A few floors above, Camille sat in the Cole Foundation's main conference room, reviewing scholarship applications. She paused and glanced at the clock on the wall. She knew what time it was. She knew the exact moment the papers would be served. And in that moment, a flood of emotions surged. Relief, dread, sorrow. But above all, clarity. The charade was over. She was no longer the quietly suffering wife. She had become the architect of her own justice. An hour later, Nathaniel stormed into the Foundation's offices. The security guards recognized him. He still owned the building, but even they were taken aback by the rage in his stride. He found Camille in her private office and flung the papers onto her desk. I can't believe you did this, he hissed. You couldn't wait? You had to serve me at my company? Publicly humiliate me? Camille met his glare with composure. Inside, her heart pounded, but she refused to show weakness. You humiliated me first, Nathaniel, she replied evenly. We agreed the papers would be delivered this week. That's standard, a designated location. She folded her hands calmly. I'm sorry if it bruises your ego, but what did you expect, that I'd hand them to you over dinner and let you hide everything behind closed doors? This is a legal process, she continued. Don't confuse it with your personal comfort. Her voice was firm, the finality of her words slicing through the air. He stared at her for a long beat, the reality of the situation sinking in. I'll contest it, he said quietly. You won't get away with this. I'll fight you, for custody, for the Foundation, for everything. She sighed, weariness tugging at her voice. You have every right to fight, Nathaniel, but are you ready for the world to hear how Sienna factored into the collapse of our marriage? Are you prepared for the media to feast on every email, every receipt, every lie? Her words weren't a threat, they were a promise. His fury shifted to despair. I never wanted it to come to this, he whispered. Camille's eyes softened briefly. Neither did I, she said. But here we are. He left without another word, and Camille collapsed into her chair, the weight of it all pressing against her shoulders. The legal war had only just begun. But even through the ache, she felt a sliver of power stir within her. She had taken the reins back. She would not let Nathaniel's betrayal dictate her life, or her child's. With the divorce looming, the landscape around them began to shift. Business associates who once fawned over Nathaniel kept their distance, wary of the impending scandal. Others moved in closer, hoping to grab whatever crumbs might fall from a fractured coal empire. As her world threatened to unravel, Camille found unexpected comfort in the support of friends. Texts, invitations to lunch, quiet check-ins. And through it all, Sarah Donnelly, the friend who had first warned her, remained a steady presence. They often met at a serene cafe tucked into a side street near the Embarcadero. Camille would sip her decaf latte, and Sarah would offer grounded, no-nonsense advice. You need to protect yourself, Cam, she warned one afternoon. San Francisco can be brutal, especially when it comes to high-profile divorces. Don't trust anyone you're not absolutely sure about. Meanwhile, Jonah Reyes continued digging into Sienna's activities. What he uncovered made Camille's blood run cold. Sienna had established a shell corporation, SB Holdings, and was actively courting heavyweight investors from Japan and the Middle East. She wasn't just riding Nathaniel's coattails anymore. She was carving out her own empire, using the affair as her springboard. Worse, Sienna seemed bent on publicly humiliating Camille. Social media buzzed with rumors, many of them traced back to accounts linked to Sienna's circle. Gossip blogs speculated about a tech mogul's wife, allegedly out of touch, paranoid, and too consumed by her foundation to notice her husband's needs. Tabloid headlines screamed, "Billionaire's blinded wife ignored signs, mistress takes charge." Camille had always avoided the tabloids, but now she was being dragged through the digital mud, mocked in the court of public opinion. Richard Monroe, ever calm, advised her to stay silent. Don't play her game. Our case is built on facts, adultery, financial misconduct. She can stir up all the noise she wants in the press. We'll speak through the law. Still, the strain was real. Camille was now 7 months pregnant. Her body was changing. Her emotions felt like tidal waves, and her marriage had crumbled. But she refused to collapse under the weight. She poured herself into her work, overseeing scholarship applications and meeting with potential donors. Her foundation had to remain untouched, untarnished. In her quieter moments, she prepared for the baby's arrival, buying soft onesies, arranging the nursery in the penthouse. Though every time she walked into that room, a pang of sorrow surfaced. Would this still be her home in the months to come? Meanwhile, Nathaniel was fighting his own secret war against Sienna. He made calls to city officials, pulled strings, and quietly pushed to delay her construction permits. He even leaked whispers about her questionable business ethics. It was a gamble. If the full truth of their affair came out, it could backfire spectacularly. But Nathaniel was desperate, furious. He'd once welcomed Sienna into his life, now she was threatening to dismantle everything he'd built. Sienna made a personal threat. She hinted that she had compromising photos of herself with Nathaniel, images that, if released, could decimate his reputation. Nathaniel was trapped, a prisoner of his own reckless decisions. He had played with fire, and now he stood in the center of the blaze. Camille watched it all unfold from the sidelines, unsure if she should feel satisfied watching Nathaniel squirm or pity him for becoming a pawn in Sienna's twisted agenda. She had once loved this man. Now she barely recognized the desperate figure, fumbling to keep control of his own legacy. One afternoon, Camille received a letter, an old-fashioned envelope, addressed in flowing, graceful handwriting. She immediately recognized the return address, Coal Hollow Estate, Nathaniel's ancestral home in Napa Valley, where his grandmother, Vivienne Cole, resided. Vivienne was a formidable woman, once a queen of West Coast high society, known for her poise, her exacting standards, and her fierce devotion to the Cole name. Though she and Camille had never been particularly close, they had always shared a mutual, if distant, respect, and Camille had always sensed that Vivienne noticed more than she ever admitted. The letter read, "My dearest Camille, I have just become aware of the turmoil between you and Nathaniel. It brings me no joy to see our family name embroiled in scandal, especially with my future great-grandchild on the way. Please grant me the honor of your company at Cole Hollow this weekend. There are matters of legacy and inheritance we must address in person. With warm regards, Vivienne Cole." Camille sat with the invitation for hours. Part of her bristled at the Cole family's continued need to control everything, even her unborn child's future. But another part of her understood that Vivienne might be a crucial ally in ensuring long-term stability for the baby. And perhaps, just perhaps, Vivienne had her own reasons for stepping in now. Reasons that had nothing to do with sentimentality. In the end, she accepted. That weekend, Camille was driven by town car to the Vineyard estate. The grounds were immaculately kept, hedges trimmed like sculpture, the central fountain gurgling a melodic welcome. Vivienne met her at the grand entrance, regal in a dark green dress, her silver hair swept into a pristine chignon. "Camille, dear," Vivienne greeted, offering a kiss on the cheek. "Thank you for coming." They moved to a sun-drenched drawing room overlooking the blooming rose gardens. A servant brought tea and delicate pastries. Vivienne wasted no time. "I won't pretend to fully understand the details of your relationship with Nathaniel," she began, "but I know he has failed you. I do not condone his actions. My concern now is for my great-grandchild, who is coming into this world amid unpleasant circumstances." Her words, while calm, carried the weight of dynastic duty. Camille sipped her tea, trying to stay composed. "I'm doing everything I can to ensure the baby's well-being." Vivienne nodded slowly, her gaze sharp. "That is precisely why I asked you here. Regardless of how the divorce proceeds, this child carries Cole blood. I will not allow scandal or corporate conflict to jeopardize their inheritance. Certain trusts and heirlooms must be preserved. I intend to see that they are protected for the next generation." Camille blinked, caught off guard by Vivienne's frankness. "I'd welcome any help you can offer, Mrs. Cole," she said quietly. "I just want what's fair for my child." "Then let us speak plainly," Vivienne replied, setting her teacup down with a soft clink. "Nathaniel has disappointed me deeply, but I cannot completely turn my back on him. He is still my grandson." Her voice softened, though it retained its signature authority. "But in you, Camille, I see the qualities that endure: strength, compassion, and integrity. If you're willing, I would like to establish a trust in the child's name, a measure to ensure that, no matter what the courts decide, their future will be protected." Emotion welled in Camille's chest. Behind the cold refinement, she could sense that Vivienne was trying, genuinely, to uphold the family legacy and safeguard her great-grandchild's life. "I truly appreciate that," Camille said. They spent the rest of the afternoon ironing out the details. Vivienne offered the assistance of her own legal team, promising to work with Richard Monroe to ensure the trust would be shielded, untouchable by Nathaniel or Sienna. By dusk, Camille departed Cole Hollow with cautious optimism. Maybe not everything was lost. Maybe her child could still carry a part of the Cole legacy without inheriting the scars of betrayal. The day of the preliminary divorce hearing arrived. The atmosphere in the courthouse conference room was thick with tension as Camille and Nathaniel sat across from each other, flanked by their legal teams. The purpose of the session, to establish temporary terms for finances, housing, and most importantly, the unborn child. Richard Monroe laid out Camille's case with clear, unwavering precision. He cited Nathaniel's infidelity, the emotional toll it had taken on Camille, and the necessity for spousal support, especially given how far along she was in her pregnancy. Camille sat still and composed, her hands folded in her lap. She knew the law was on her side, but that didn't dull the emotional sting of the proceedings. Across the room, Nathaniel's attorney, Janet Kleinman, launched a pointed counterattack. She painted Camille as emotionally fragile, overly invested in her foundation at the cost of her marriage. She claimed Nathaniel had always been financially responsible, that the affair was brief, regretted, and not worth harsh penalties. Nathaniel himself said little. When he did glance Camille's way, the look in his eyes teetered between regret and sorrow. When questioned by the magistrate, Nathaniel finally spoke. "I recognize my error in judgment," he said. "I want to make amends and be there for my child." Richard Monroe responded with calm precision, presenting documentation that exposed Nathaniel's ongoing involvement with Sienna Blake, along with suspicious transactions funneled through a shared investment account. The moment Sienna's name was mentioned, the mood in the room shifted, tension surged. Janet Kleinman objected, calling the evidence circumstantial at best, but the impact had already landed. The court established a temporary arrangement. Nathaniel would provide spousal support, continue covering Camille's health insurance, and be prohibited from depleting any joint financial assets. A formal hearing date was set to resolve permanent settlement terms. As they exited the conference room, Camille exhaled, grateful for the favorable ruling, at least for now. Nathaniel approached her in the hallway. "I mean it," he said softly, eyes downcast. "I'm sorry." She studied his face, weighing the truth behind his words. "For our child's sake," she replied quietly. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, surrounded by her legal team. Outside, reporters swarmed like hornets, cameras flashing, voices calling out scandal-fueled questions. Camille held her head high and said nothing. Sarah Donnelly was waiting by the curb and quickly ushered Camille into a waiting car. "Focus on the baby," she whispered. "Block out the noise." Back at the penthouse, Camille began packing. The court hadn't required her to leave, but she knew she had to, for her own mental health. The place felt poisoned now. The walls that had once held love were now haunted by betrayal. With Sarah's help, she secured a modest but warm apartment in Pacific Heights. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. A space she could prepare for the baby, free from the echoes of deception. In the aftermath of the hearing, Sienna Blake's star began to fall. Corporate clients who had once admired her business savvy now kept their distance. The relentless swirl of gossip and scandal was damaging. The tabloids had cast her as the villainous seductress who broke up a tech empire's golden couple. Worse still, Nathaniel's legal team found ways to stall her progress. City officials, many with ties to Cole family interests, delayed her building permits, scrutinized her paperwork, and dragged their feet. Investors grew uneasy. Backers began to pull out. In a desperate attempt to reframe her image, Sienna threw a lavish cocktail event at her newly acquired downtown penthouse. She invited venture capitalists, journalists, and social influencers, hoping to rebrand herself as a misunderstood trailblazer. But the plan backfired. Word leaked that Nathaniel Cole might be preparing a lawsuit, alleging breach of fiduciary duty. The whispers were enough to scare off half her guest list. Given the rumors of Sienna's insider dealings, many of the invitees didn't want to risk aligning themselves with someone locked in a public war with the Cole family. The party flopped. Over half the guest list bailed at the last minute. Sienna wandered through her opulent living room, untouched champagne in hand, seething with frustration over the no-shows. Her phone buzzed non-stop, messages from gossip bloggers sniffing for scandal. It was clear she was being backed into a corner. Socially, professionally, desperate, she reached out to Nathaniel, leaving a string of tearful voicemails. "I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted my own success. I love you." But he never called back. Nathaniel, in truth, was caught in a storm of conflicting emotions: anger, shame, and a flickering ember of what he once felt for Sienna. He had adored her once. Now he saw her as the spark that lit the flame beneath his unraveling life. The divorce was looming, the legal war raging, and a child on the way. The price of their affair was steep and rising. And so Sienna watched the empire she had tried to build begin to crumble. To many, it felt like justice. To her, it felt like cruel irony, punishment for playing the same game men had thrived on for generations. She refused to fade quietly. In her mind, she was not going down without a fight. As the legal proceedings dragged on, Camille reached her 8th month of pregnancy. The stakes were rising. So was her need to manage stress. Her obstetrician warned her gently at every visit: avoid high-pressure situations. She tried, but conflict had a way of finding her. One afternoon, she received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the line trembled. "Camille Cole?" "Yes," Camille answered, bracing herself. Calls like this often came from nosy reporters or online trolls. My name is Jenna Phillips, the woman said. I work in the finance department at Cole Enterprises, and I'm sorry to bother you, but I have information about Sienna Blake. Camille froze. Go on. Jenna took a deep breath. I was tasked with reviewing internal expense accounts. And Miss Blake has been funneling money out of the company, small amounts, steady, over time, but it's added up, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Camille's eyes narrowed. She's embezzling, Jenna continued. No one caught it because of her connection to Mr. Cole. But with the divorce and everything going public, I'm afraid they'll pin this on me if I don't speak up. They'll turn on me if I stay silent, Jenna said, her voice shaking. Camille's heart raced. Was Sienna embezzling right under Nathaniel's nose? She asked Jenna for specifics, and the woman delivered. Dates, dollar amounts, and the account numbers used to siphon the funds. The numbers weren't just suspicious, they were damning. Camille felt her pulse quicken with every figure Jenna named. Camille wasted no time. She forwarded the information directly to Jonah Rise and her attorney, Richard Monroe. If Sienna had truly been stealing from Cole Enterprises, the implications were massive. It would bolster Camille's case for spousal and child support, evidence that Nathaniel had failed to protect the company his child would one day inherit a stake in. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was negligence, and it gave Camille the leverage she hadn't even known she needed. If Sienna's sabotage came to light, the fallout could shift everything. That night, Camille considered calling Nathaniel herself, but stopped. He had made his choices. She didn't owe him a rescue, not this time. Instead, she let her legal team handle it. A formal complaint was drafted, the evidence cataloged with precision, dates, transfers, internal audits, everything airtight. She reviewed every line of it with cold resolve, her fury refined into strategy. Justice moved slowly, but the noose around Sienna tightened with every passing day. Soon, word of the embezzlement reached Nathaniel through his own internal compliance team. The truth was undeniable. The paper trail damning. Torn between fury, shame, and betrayal, he made a definitive move. Sienna was out. Her security clearance revoked, corporate accounts frozen. She was persona non grata at Cole Enterprises. Sienna didn't go quietly. She went to the press, angrily claiming she was being smeared by Camille, who was bitter, hormonal, and threatened by a younger, more ambitious woman. Her performance was dramatic, but hollow, and Camille refused to play into it. The tabloids ran wild with the story, spinning a scandalous narrative of two women feuding over one powerful man. But the real truth, emails, wire transfers, shell accounts, remained sealed in court filings. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings advanced. A final hearing loomed, where everything would be decided. Division of assets, custody terms, and the future of Camille's child. The media hovered, eager to report every detail. Ironically, it was Vivian Cole's old guard connections that delivered the final blow. She quietly urged influential members of high society to blacklist Sienna from their events. Real estate leaders who once fawned over her now shut their doors. They wanted no association with scandal. Sienna's world shrank. Her business interests faltered. The empire she had tried to build was crumbling, fast. As for Camille, she settled fully into her new apartment, preparing the nursery in soft yellows and greens. The space was calm, welcoming. She hired a small support staff to help her during the final weeks of pregnancy, fully aware that the hardest part was yet to come, but also knowing that for the first time in a long time, she was in control of her life again. Camille knew she might soon be a single mother. Her heart ached for the vision of a happy family that would never be, but she no longer chased after something broken. Instead, she focused on creating a peaceful life for her baby. But life had its own sense of timing. Her water broke 2 weeks early, on a night when she had just returned from a particularly grueling legal meeting. Panic surged through her as a contraction tore through her body. She barely managed to dial 911, breathless, before she was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. News traveled quickly. Sarah Donnelly arrived within the hour, offering comfort and support. Jonah Rise waited in the hallway, ready to relay any needed updates to Richard Monroe, who sent flowers with a note wishing you strength and love on this important day. The only person missing was Nathaniel. Camille labored for hours. Her skin was damp with sweat, her body racked with pain. Nurses moved efficiently around her, monitoring every heartbeat, every shift in her vitals. Through it all, she couldn't help but think of how she had once imagined this moment. Nathaniel at her side, whispering encouragement, holding her hand. Instead, she was surrounded by friends and professionals. Tears of frustration mingled with physical agony. Then the door swung open. Nathaniel rushed in, face flushed, hair a mess. Sarah had called him, felt he needed to be there, no matter what Camille believed. Camille looked at him through blurred vision, unsure how to feel. Did she even want him there? After everything? He stepped to the bedside, tentative. "Let me help," he whispered, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. She was too far gone to protest, and deep down, some small part of her believed their son deserved this moment of togetherness. She nodded faintly. Nathaniel stayed. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, coached her breathing. After grueling hours, the room filled with a piercing cry. "It's a boy," a nurse announced, joy in her voice. The baby was placed on Camille's chest, a tiny, warm miracle. Tears spilled from her eyes. Nathaniel looked down at their son, his own eyes misted with emotion. For that one moment, the battles, the anger, the lawsuits, they all faded. What remained was a pure, unshakable connection between two parents and their newborn child. Camille's recovery was swift. Within hours, she was transferred to a private room. Flowers arrived in waves from Vivienne and other well-wishers. Nathaniel lingered, unsure whether he had the right to stay close. But to his surprise, Camille allowed him to visit the baby. In the soft glow of the hospital lights, Nathaniel sat at her bedside, their newborn son cradled gently in his arms. The baby, named Caleb Nathaniel Cole, had a soft tuft of dark hair and wide, curious eyes that took in the world around him. Camille watched him closely. She saw Nathaniel's expression shift, filled with wonder, humility, and a quiet kind of love. "He's perfect," Nathaniel whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Camille, I'm so sorry. For everything. I can't undo what I've done, but I want to be a father to him." She studied him, trying to measure the sincerity in his voice. "That's good, Nathaniel," she said softly. "Because whether or not we stay married, Caleb needs a father." He nodded, his gaze never leaving the child in his arms. "I want to support you both, to be present. I'll agree to whatever's fair. Just let me be part of his life." It was a fragile truce, like the eye of a storm, calm but surrounded by wreckage. Still, Camille welcomed it, for Caleb's sake. She didn't know if forgiveness would ever come, but in that moment she believed Nathaniel's love for their son was real. A month passed. Late-night feedings, pediatric appointments, small joys and exhausting adjustments. Camille, with the help of a nanny, began to find rhythm in the new normal. Nathaniel visited often, using every moment he could to bond with Caleb. But the space between him and Camille remained. The wounds were fresh. Trust didn't come easy. Then came the day of the final divorce hearing. Outside the courthouse, tension hung thick in the air. Reporters lined the steps, flashes from cameras lighting up the gray morning as Nathaniel's limousine pulled up. He stepped out in a tailored suit, his face unreadable. Minutes later, Camille arrived in a modest town car, a folder of legal documents in hand. She walked forward, head high, composed. Vivienne Cole was notably absent, choosing to remain behind the scenes during public spectacles like this. The hearing itself was quiet, tense. Richard Monroe presented a carefully negotiated settlement, months in the making. Camille would receive a substantial financial agreement, enough to guarantee that she and Caleb would live comfortably and securely. Nathaniel would pay child support and establish a trust fund for Caleb's education and future. Custody was granted to Camille, with Nathaniel receiving regular visitation rights. Shared rights and joint decision-making on major matters were part of the custody terms. The penthouse would remain in Nathaniel's possession, while Camille retained her new apartment in Pacific Heights. He had offered to let her keep the penthouse, but Camille declined, not out of pride, but out of principle. That space no longer held peace. The Cole Foundation would continue under joint governance, ensuring that Camille's philanthropic work remained intact and free from interference. But she had no intention of letting it remain branded by a man who nearly destroyed her. By then, Sienna Blake was facing the consequences of her actions. Her embezzlement case had gained traction in court, turning her into a public warning, an emblem of ambition gone too far. The judge looked over the final agreement. Do both parties agree to these terms? Nathaniel glanced at Camille, his voice tight. I agree, Your Honor. Camille, arms folded across her chest, nodded calmly. I agree. Just like that, it was over. The gavel came down, finalizing the dissolution of their marriage. Outside, a crowd of paparazzi swarmed, shouting for a statement. Camille kept walking, silent, composed. She didn't need to speak. Her strength was written all over her face. Nathaniel paused briefly, then addressed the cameras. I ask for privacy during this difficult time. My focus is my child's well-being. No further comment. With the legal war behind her, Camille threw herself into her work. She began the process of rebranding the Cole Foundation to the Thompson Cole Foundation, in memory of her late mother, Grace Thompson. It was a symbolic shift, a declaration of independence, and a fresh chapter for her and Caleb. Her name now stood beside her son's legacy, not behind Nathaniel's shadow. She moved forward with the trust Vivienne Cole had arranged for Caleb, ensuring his future would be secure. Though she no longer bore the Cole name personally, having legally reverted to Camille Thompson, she accepted that her son would carry it forward. It was his to redefine. Nathaniel worked to rebuild his life in the background. He stepped out of the spotlight, distancing himself from the scandal, focusing on stabilizing his company and regaining investor trust. The fall had humbled him, and though he still existed in a world of influence and wealth, he no longer took any of it for granted. He saw Caleb regularly, each visit both a joy and a quiet ache, a reminder of what he had lost and what he had gained. Fatherhood. As for Sienna Blake, she faced deposition after deposition. Lawsuits drained her finances. Her name became toxic among San Francisco's elite. Her real estate ambitions collapsed. The rumors said she left the city altogether, vanished, possibly under a new identity. Whether she would ever resurface was anyone's guess. Months slipped into a year. Camille stood on the terrace of her new apartment, watching the skyline glow with the soft orange hue of a setting sun. Caleb babbled in his playpen nearby, his laughter rising into the evening air. She smiled, not because life had gone as planned, but because she had survived it, reshaped it, and reclaimed it on her own terms. The Hudson shimmered in the golden dusk. Camille stood on the terrace overlooking the bay, Caleb toddling at her feet. She was hosting a small fundraiser for the newly renamed Thompson Cole Foundation. The event was intimate, elegant. Guests sipped champagne, chatted warmly, and contributed generously to her expanding educational programs. Nathaniel made a quiet entrance. He greeted Camille with a respectful nod before scooping Caleb into his arms, pulling silly faces that sent the toddler into fits of laughter. It was a quiet, beautiful picture of co-parenting, something Camille had once thought impossible in the thick of betrayal. Later, in a private corner of the terrace, Nathaniel approached her. This is incredible, he said, gesturing toward the event. What you've done with the foundation, it's inspiring. Camille offered a gentle smile. Thank you. I appreciate that. The kids were helping. They're the reason I do all of this. They stood in silence, watching Caleb buzz around the space with a toy airplane. For a moment, Camille felt a bittersweet pang. For the life they might have had things turned out differently. But that ache was short-lived. Because in that moment, she also recognized the woman she'd become, stronger, wiser, more in control of her own path than ever before. I'm proud of you, Nathaniel said softly. Camille glanced at him, seeing the remorse in his expression. I'm proud of me too, she replied, and somehow, that was enough. On an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, Camille received an unexpected message from someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Mark Sullivan, an old college flame, someone she had dated briefly before Nathaniel swept into her life. Mark was now a pediatric surgeon in Chicago and had come to San Francisco for a medical conference. He decided to reach out. Mark was everything Nathaniel wasn't. Quiet, sincere, grounded. They met for coffee. The conversation was easy, natural. At first, Camille was guarded. She was still healing from everything she'd endured. But Mark's calm demeanor, his genuine interest in her life and in Caleb, slowly began to soften her heart. He accompanied her to a children's hospital event sponsored by the foundation. He was a hit, entertaining kids with balloon animals and clumsy magic tricks. Caleb adored him, squealing with laughter whenever Mark danced or pulled a silly face. Camille stood back and watched, smiling. She hadn't felt this kind of lightness in a long time. Later, Mark confessed his feelings. "Camille, I know you've been through so much. Through the storm, I don't want to pressure you into anything you're not ready for," Mark said gently. "But I can't pretend my heart doesn't skip every time I see you." Or Caleb. Camille felt her throat tighten. Tears welled in her eyes. She had been hesitant, wary of letting someone new into her son's world. But even the darkest storms could pass. And sometimes, after everything, the sun still came through. With patience and intention, she allowed Mark into her life. A relationship built not on wealth or reputation, but on shared values, gentle care, and mutual trust. 2 years passed. The scandals faded, replaced by newer headlines. The city moved on. Camille thrived. She had become one of the most respected philanthropists in the Bay Area. Caleb, now a spirited toddler, was adored by everyone who met him. Camille used her platform to advocate for single mothers in high society, raising awareness about the realities and triumphs of motherhood and ambition coexisting. Her relationship with Nathaniel had settled into a rhythm, co-parenting, civil, respectful. He honored her boundaries. She let him be the father he needed to be. At times she caught glimpses of regret in his eyes, silent acknowledgments of the woman he had once lost. But their journeys were no longer entwined. Camille had found a quiet, steadfast love in Mark. It wasn't tabloid-worthy, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. As for Sienna Blake, whispers placed her somewhere in Europe, living under an assumed identity. Some said she worked in murky real estate circles. Others claimed she had found another wealthy benefactor. Camille sometimes wondered if she'd ever return, seeking vengeance or relevance. But ultimately, she saw Sienna's fall as the natural result of her own choices. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Camille sat on a wooden bench in Golden Gate Park, watching Caleb toss breadcrumbs to ducks paddling across the pond. She placed a hand over her heart, reflecting on how far she'd come. From a trusting wife caught in betrayal, to a mother forging a legacy. A few feet away, Mark knelt beside Caleb, pointing to a group of turtles sunning themselves on a rock. Camille stood, her posture strong, her smile effortless. This was her life now, and she was at peace. Sometimes, life drops us into darkness, just to help us find our light. Camille Thompson had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and public scrutiny. She fought for her child's future. She stood tall through every legal battle. And she rose, not as someone's wife, but as her own woman. Yes, she served her tech mogul husband divorce papers after discovering his affair. But that wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything. Dear friend, if Camille's journey has touched something within you, know this: you are not alone. As the Stoics remind us, the obstacle is the way. It's through our trials that we're carved into who we're meant to become. Camille didn't just survive the storm, she grew roots because of it. Her story isn't just about heartbreak or betrayal, it's about rediscovering herself in the silence that followed, and choosing peace over resentment, courage over bitterness, grace over defeat. You too can rise. You too can rewrite your ending. Because sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are hidden in the ashes of what we thought was the end. If this story resonated with you, we'd be so grateful if you gave it a like, shared it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribed for more stories of resilience and hope. Your support helps us continue telling tales that matter.